All right, today we're jumping into something absolutely fascinating, a massive shift in early Christian belief. We're going to explore how the very idea of the Savior evolved and how the answer to a fundamental question of faith changed dramatically over time.
So let's start with the big question, right? Who saves us? Now, you might think you know the answer, especially in a Christian context today, but believe me, it was not always this clear cut. Actually, for the very first Christians, the whole idea of a savior went through this incredible transformation. It literally shifted the center of their spiritual universe.
Okay, so here's our game plan for this explainer. We'll start by looking at this major shift in salvation. Then we'll establish the original view of God as the Savior and see how Christ emerged as a new mediator. After that, we'll explore the cultural world that was so desperate for a hero. And finally, we'll unpack the price of that victory and witness the final transformation to Christ as the universal Savior.
All right, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. How in the world did the main focus of salvation move from God the Father over to Jesus Christ? It's a heck of a journey, so let's trace it. Now, to really get this, we've got to go back to the beginning. We need to look at the original belief system that early Christianity inherited from Judaism. Set the stage. And the key concept here, the bedrock, is something called theocentrism. Basically, it's a worldview where God the Father is the center of, well, everything. He's the ultimate reality, the sole source of all things, and that absolutely includes salvation. No middlemen, no go-betweens. It's a direct line. And you can see this so clearly in a verse like this from Psalm 68. I mean, listen to the language. The God of our salvation, a God who saves, the one who delivers from death. It's all God, all the time. For centuries, this was the undisputed truth. But then, Christ enters the scene. And with him, we start to see the very first steps of this huge transformation. The ground starts to shift, maybe slowly at first, but with massive, massive implications down the road. And what's really interesting is that at first, it wasn't a replacement. It was more of an addition. Look at this. The established view on the left is simple. God saves. End of story. But then, in the New Testament, this new layer gets added. God is still the Savior, but now he's working through Christ, who's called the one mediator. So Christ isn't the source of salvation yet, but he's suddenly become the essential pipeline. And this is where things get really interesting. See, at first, Christ was seen as the ultimate proof that God wanted to save humanity. But pretty soon, the thinking starts to pivot. The focus shifts from what Christ revealed to the value of Christ himself. He's no longer just the guy delivering the message of salvation. He's on his way to becoming the very source of it. Okay, so a big theological shift like this doesn't just happen in a vacuum, right? It was deeply, deeply influenced by the world around it, by the hopes and especially the fears of the time. Let's take a look at what was going on. If you could travel back to the 2nd century Roman Empire, you'd find a world that felt, for a lot of people, pretty pessimistic and scary. There was this widespread belief that the world was just crawling with demons and hostile spiritual powers, and that created this deep, gut-level need for a hero, a savior. Not some abstract idea, but a powerful, personal liberator who could step in and fight for you. And you can see this need reflected all over the culture of the time. You've got these mystery religions popping up, promising salvation if you just took part in the story of a dying and rising God. There was this popular idea of an extraterrestrial savior, some divine being who would descend from the heavens to rescue humanity. And then there was something called erotology. These are basically religious hymns that celebrate the powers of a specific God. And guess what? That format was a perfect fit for songs praising Christ. All these ideas were just floating in the cultural air, shaping how people were starting to think about this new savior figure. So if Christ is going to be this powerful liberator, this ultimate victor, his story needed to explain how he won the battle. And the answer, more and more, started to zero in on the meaning of his suffering and his death. Theologians started talking about the oikonomia. Now, that's a fancy word, but it's basically the idea of God's grand plan for salvation. Think of it like a cosmic drama, with Christ right at the center. His entire life story, his birth, his death, his resurrection, wasn't just an example to follow. It was the actual mechanism of salvation itself. Now, a really important group in pushing this idea forward were the Quartodecimans. These were early Christian communities with strong Jewish roots, and they celebrated Easter on the very same day as the Jewish Passover. For them, that connection was everything. They saw Christ as the real paschal lamb, the true sacrifice, whose death had real, universal power to save all of humanity. And this way of thinking led to some incredibly powerful statements, like this one right here. The logic is simple but profound. Christ suffered for a reason, so that his wounds might give us life. And even more than that, the belief was that his suffering was only for us. It was a deliberate act, done entirely for humanity's sake. And wow, this next quote from another early text just perfectly captures this whole idea. Just listen to the rhythm of it. It's almost like a poem. From his passion, we get our impassibility. From his death, we get our immortality. From his wound, our healing. You see, it's this perfect, direct exchange. He takes on the suffering, and we get the reward. The victory is won through his sacrifice. And right there, with that idea firmly in place, we've reached the end of this incredible journey. The transformation is complete. The Savior has evolved. This slide really brings it all home. Look at the before and after. On the left, we've got our starting point from the Psalms. Our God is a God who saves. Clear, direct, all about God the Father. But then, on the right, from the early Christian writer Melito of Sardis, the voice speaking is now Christ's. And the declaration is just stunning. I have freed the condemned. I am your salvation. I am your king. The agent of salvation has completely, and I mean completely, changed.
So, at the end of the day, what does this all mean? It means the entire spiritual center of gravity has shifted. Salvation, which was once understood as this act flowing directly from God the Father, is now seen as something accomplished through the person, the suffering, and the ultimate victory of Jesus Christ, the Redeemer of all humanity. And that, of course, leaves us with a pretty big question to think about. We've seen how the fears and ideas of the second century world helped shape this image of Christ as a savior, so it kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? In our own time, with our own unique anxieties and challenges, how does our world continue to shape our image of what a savior looks like?